Cody's already gone. I did fail to make one announcement, and I apologize for that, but there is going to be a youth meeting group tonight, and they're going bowling. So the $15 if they want to go bowling, and also if you're young at heart and would like to bowl, well, go join the kids and go bowling tonight. They'll be up here at, I believe, at 6:30. Jesus has left the building. When I heard Tony use that phrase last week, I knew that I had the topic for my sermon for this week. I thought it was very appropriate as a title, following the sermon series that Pastor Russ has been giving us on the best is yet to come, the 7 doors of spiritual growth. To review, for the past several weeks, he has taken us on a journey. There are various disciplines that we need to practice and make a habit of doing if we're going to grow spiritually and if we're going to confront a world that is becoming increasingly sinful. We learned about witnessing, worshiping, connecting, praying, studying the Bible, serving, and giving. Russ has been preparing us, if we're truly to be the disciples of Christ, to be sent out into the world to live as Christ would have us to live and be living examples of his love. But I got to tell you, that's a scary thing. Of the world that we're living in. We need Jesus to be going with us and giving us the courage to be his disciples out there. I didn't realize it at the time I was thinking about this, but there actually was a book written by a gentleman by the name of Paul Vieira entitled Jesus Has Left the Building. His particular thesis is that he has taken issue with the modern way the church functions. His central theme is built on the premise that Christianity has become institutionalized and is dominated by form, function, and church politics. He makes the case that the earliest Christians written about in the Bible did not build churches, but rather they met in each other's homes and spread the gospel through each other. They, in effect, were living churches. It wasn't until the 4th century when the Roman Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity and made it the official religion of the state that Christians, tired of being crucified, persecuted, began to relax and began to lose their identity as a prophetic culture. The church and politics were married and became one. Priest-approved and licensed clergy creating a divide between men of the cloth and lay people. They began building structures that would be fit for a king to worship in rather than in the houses of the common man. They began to replace the activities that the individual had done, and they institutionalized a form of worship that was imposed by the church and has been dominated on church life for the last 1,700 years. I invite you to take a look at the Methodist Book of Discipline and all the rules and regulations we as Methodists are supposed to follow to get some idea about what it is that I'm referring to. His solution is for us to recover and return to the apostolic form of church. This is a dream. It was a dream of God the Father to have a multitude of sent ones, just as in the beginning, that each of us would become, once again, a living church. For this dream to come true, there are some changes that we're going to have to make. Believers in Jesus will have to emerge from behind the closed doors of this church subculture and live out their faith daily as a part of real life. I think there is some validity in his comments. I think there's some validity in the way that we currently practice our religion. And we're comfortable, and we need to get uncomfortable, and we need to go out there and be living witnesses to God. Along the same line, there was another book that I recently read that had a profound impact on me personally, and it was entitled The Jesus Style. Now, this was written back in 1983 by a gentleman who was having a crisis of faith. In one of the chapters in the book, he was referring back to the protests that were going on in the 1960s, and many of us in this room are old enough to remember all those protests that were going on and the things, and there were Jesus, yes. Christianity, no. In other words, people believed in Jesus, but they didn't believe in the way the church was practicing what it is that Jesus had taught us. Personally, I'm not so sure it changed a great deal, even up to today. The essence of the book is that we have concentrated and elevated the deity side of God, rather than thinking about and looking at the human side of God. You know, we've kind of lost touch with the human Jesus. Remember, he was just like us. He was a man as well as being a God. He sweated like us. He bled like us. He had all of the bodily functions that we have. And he went about doing his work as both the Son of God and as a human being, serving as a living model of what it is that he would have us to do. And we need to remember that. God was both human and God. I think a good example of that is the New Testament reading that we had for today. On the road to Capernaum, the disciples were disputing among themselves who was the greatest, who was going to take over when Jesus was no longer with us, which one of them was going to be like God on earth, if you will. But when they were asked by Jesus what they were talking about, they wouldn't say anything because they were ashamed, because they knew that what they were talking about was not right. They shouldn't be doing that. But Jesus, instead of rebuking them, he got them to talking, and he gave them an unexpected formula. He taught them that to be first, one must be last, and servant to all. He further taught that servant leaders must become childlike in their humility, wonder, honesty, and trust. They understood this as we understand it from an intellectual basis, but understanding and practicing are two entirely different things. Today, our culture seems to be what's in it for me. Many of the church seem to think that if I follow living precepts of Christianity, God will reward me with prosperity and with a consistent rise in status, and I can surround myself with people of my standing. I can feel good about myself, and I won't have to associate or worry about all of those folks out there. How different would our world be if we all practiced servant leadership and we took everything and set it in sight of Jesus? It would make all the difference in the world. If everything we did, we asked, could I go on doing this if Jesus was watching? Or if everything we said, we first asked, could I go on talking like this if Jesus was listening to me? If we were to do that, there'd be a whole lot of things that we could be saved from doing and saying. However, the fact of the matter is there is no if, because Jesus is with us everywhere. He hears and sees everything that we do. But we can forget that. Both of these books have a common theme, and that is a call to change how we interact with the world and what it is. And I think that's what it is that Russ was trying to teach us as we get ready to go out into the world. But we have an uphill battle. And if you ask me right now, the devil and his minions are winning. Just think for a moment. In our own area here, St. Luke's is closing. Many of our churches are losing members. Christian influence on society is losing ground. All you have to do is look at our schools, popular culture, politics. Crime, this morning before I left to come here, turned on the news. 70% of our population acknowledged that they were Christian, but only 30% said they went to church. But all is not lost. I like to think church, as we go to church and work as followers of Jesus, as I think of us as outliers. Now, I came to learn about outliers when I was the associate director of the John M. Shepherd Public Leadership Institute. We had a gentleman by the name of Malcolm Gladwell at the time, and he's a famous artist, and he wrote a book called Outliers. person or thing situated away from or detached from the main body or system. We had a gentleman by the name of Malcolm Gladwell at the time, and he's a famous artist, and he wrote a book called Outliers, Measurement for Success. Now, the definition of an outlier is a person or thing situated away from or detached from the main body or system. And Gladwell took this concept of outliers and used it as a basis for explaining how individuals outside the mainstream can have an impact and change society. It is his thesis that outliers have the most impact upon our society. Two of his famous quotes are, "Outliers are those who have been given opportunities and who have the strength and presence of mind to seize them. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit." And I think that Jesus and the disciples and all of the saints in the Bible, they probably all meet the definition of an outlier. And now this brings us to our second Bible verse from the Old Testament this morning concerning David and Goliath. Now, David, as I said, as one of the features of the Bible, I think is a perfect example of what an outlier is. Somebody is going to change society and has the presence of mind and wants to do it. But Gladwell has a little bit different take on the story of David and Goliath. I don't know if many of you have heard it or seen his talk on TED Talk about this, but if not, I'd encourage you to go and take a look. It's quite interesting. But I'd like to share his version of the story of David and Goliath with you this morning. So let us reset the stage. Linnell talked about it in the scripture, but we're going to reset it. The Philistine army has come up from the plains, and they are going to attack Jerusalem and cut the Israelites' kingdom in half, and then they can go about conquering it. Well, King Saul and the Israelites have learned about this, and so they get the army and they come out, and the two armies meet in the valley of Elah. Now the Philistines, they dig in on the southern ridge, and the Israelites dig in on the northern ridge. And then they sit there and they look at each other, because neither group wants to be the one to have to go down the hill, across the valley, and back up to an entrenched enemy, because the loss of life will be horrendous. And so they don't want to have to do that. And so they sit there and they stare at each other for days. But now there is a way in which, in those days, armies could settle the issues. And this was by engaging in what they referred to as single combat. So each army would send out their champion, and they would do combat, and then whoever won, the other army would surrender, and then they would do what it is that they had set out to do. So, the Philistines send out Goliath. Now, according to our Bible verses this morning, Goliath is 6 cubits and a span, which translates into 9 feet 6 inches. Can you imagine somebody 9 feet 6 inches tall, and how big he must have been? His armor weighed 272 pounds. That's the equivalent of 5,000 shekels that we talked about. His spear, which was about 12 feet tall and all, had a diameter like this. And the spear point was over 20 pounds. Can you imagine what that might have looked like? He also carried a javelin and a sword. You see, he was so much bigger than everybody else, because the average person in those days was only about 5'4". If Barbara stood up right now, that would be about the size of the average Israelite soldier or Philistine soldier. So just imagine. There'd be Barbara and this 9'6" giant, scares me, facing each other. Now this is where it gets interesting. According to Gladwell, the reason Goliath is so big is that he suffers from hygromelia, or giantism, which is a rare disease where a tumor grows on the pituitary gland and causes excess growth hormones to be produced. One of the problems with someone who suffers from giantism is that it affects the optic nerve. And so they're either double vision or extremely nearsighted, or both. And therefore, they can't see very well. So, because he is so big and can't see and all, he is kind of slow and cumbersome, and he can't get around very much. But all the Israelites see is this gigantic man, and they're scared to death of him. Now enters David. This little shepherd boy, again, about the size of Barbara, has brought food for his brothers to the battlefield. He hears what's going on, and he goes to Saul and says, "Hey, I'll take on the task." Saul decides to let him try it since no one else is willing to do it. But he insists that David put on the armor, the traditional armor and stuff to go out and do battle, because that's, they were expecting one soldier to fight another soldier. David says, "No, I'm not worthy of wearing that stuff. I haven't proved myself. I'll go with what I'm comfortable with." And Saul relents and lets him go. So here he goes. As he walks out, he picks up 5 stones. Now later on in the Bible, you will read that there was Goliath. Goliath had 4 brothers. So David just picked up 5 stones. He figures when he takes Goliath, he has to take on the brothers, to do this. Now, these stones are not ordinary stones. The Valley of Elah and all is been formed by ancient volcanoes and all, and so the rocks and little stones there are made up of barium sulfate, which has the density of about twice any other type of stone or rock in that area. And so David goes out with his stones, and he walks up to Goliath, sticks his stone in his sling, whirls it around. Now when that rock leaves that sling, it's traveling at over 100 miles an hour. And when it hits Goliath between the eyes, it is like a 45 caliber bullet striking right here. And Goliath falls down, and David runs up, grabs his sword, cuts off his head. And the Israelites cheer, the Philistines cry out in horror, and they flee the battlefield with the Israelites in hot pursuit. Now, our traditional interpretation of this story is that it is a great victory for the underdog. But in Gladwell's view, Goliath was a sitting duck, because he was so big, he couldn't see, he was clumsy, he was a sitting target. Remember, David had fought lions and bears and tigers to protect his flock. I mean, when he flung those rocks, it didn't have to be a stationary target. He could hit a moving target. And so Goliath was a sitting duck. Now, this is reinforced by John Maxwell's law of victory. If you're familiar with Mr. Maxwell's works and all, he has one of his 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, is the law of victory. And he says that David, by practicing this law, turned a once paralyzed Israelite army into capable of defeating the invincible Philistine army. And this is how he did it. Number 1, his perspective differed from others. He didn't see what everyone else saw, an invincible giant. He saw an opportunity. His methods differed from others. He decided to use proven weapons he knew would work, rather than conventional ones. His conviction differed from others. He recognized Goliath had no covenant with God, while David himself had a covenant with God. His motives differed from others. He heard Goliath threats against God of Israel, and he knew that God would beat him. David was just going to be the instrument. His vision was different from others. He wanted to make God known as the most powerful God on earth. And his experience differed from the others. He brought to the battlefield experience. Remember, he had already fought lions and tigers and bears, and not being like one of the army people just sitting there differed from the others. He saw Goliath not as a threat too big to hit. He saw him as a target too big to miss. And so that brings us back to the beginning. Jesus has left the building. Jesus is out there. Jesus is waiting for us to leave the building and to follow him and to be witnesses to the world that he is God Almighty, and it is only through him that they will be saved. Amen. Closing hymn. And I appreciate everyone sitting through. It's been a nice, interesting morning and all, and it just goes to